My world right now is higher education. I've served as president and now chancellor at Colorado Christian University in Denver, Colorado. And of course, October 7th for Jewish people and Israelis meant, the worst attack on Israel in its history and the worst attack on the Jews since the Holocaust. But in the world of higher education, it revealed a dark side of higher education in our schools that people were shocked about. When the COVID pandemic hit and parents were getting their children all home and doing things online, parents, to their dismay, were very disappointed with what they found out happening in K through 12 schools. Many schools, not all, but were teaching things that parents were against. So what happened on October 7th is, in the world of university education, many people were saying, what's gone on with our colleges and universities now? Why are these students that were paying $40,000, $50,000 a year now denouncing Israel and praising Hamas after this incredible butchery? What has happened? I grew up in a world where we said never again. I'm a little older than probably some of you, and my uncle fought in World War II. He actually was with the U.S. Army, and I remember hearing how the state of Israel was founded because other countries wouldn't take them, and it was to be a protectorate of the Jewish people. Now we're 79 years later, and people are saying it's okay that the land be destroyed, and of course the catastrophe of what would happen to most of the world's Jews. So I'm deeply disturbed by that and moved to say something and speak, and especially influence students about why they should support Israel and why they should stand with their Jewish friends at this time. First of all, there's a moral reason. It's quite simply anti-Semitism, violent anti-Semitism, and calls for genocide are wrong. They're immoral. It's evil, and there's no getting around it. And too many university presidents were unwilling to say that, but let's be quick to say it. I mean, what happened is you have this terrorist agencies, Hamas and later Hezbollah, that they're committed in their charters to obliterate Israel and destroy the Jews with them. That's not okay. And so there's just a moral objection that we should be very quick to make. Some things are wrong. That's wrong. The second reason why we should stand against anti-Semitism, I said, was a theological reason. And I said, you don't need to get into all the details of eschatology to find this out. Just go to Romans chapter 11 in the New Testament, and Paul talks about how God's calling on Israel is irrevocable. The gifts and the calling are irrevocable. Has God rejected his people? No, he has not. God still has plans for the Jewish people. He is still bound to them. They are called his elect, his chosen people. That alone should be a tip-off that they cannot be abandoned. So that's the second reason. The third reason I talked about was a governmental reason. That one of the jobs of a government is to support and protect its people. You go to Romans chapter 13, and it talks about how the government doesn't bear a sword in vain. It's God's servant to do good. And one of its jobs is to maintain order, and another is to protect its people. And so we're living at a time where all these entities around Israel, about 7 of them, are trying to destroy Israel, and there's something like, I think there have been 28,000 missile, drone, projectile attacks on Israel since October 7th. I mean, Americans don't get this, but if you go to Israel, you'll get it. And you'll realize just, the threat of that, everyday threat, and the things you have to live with. So governments have a job to protect the people, and so does the state of Israel. They are humanly speaking, the guardian of most of the world's Jews today. And that's not to say they're perfect. And yes, it's a secular state, but in God's providence, he has allowed them to come back to the land, regathered them, and that's where they are. Then I talked about a third reason why we should stand with Israel, and I said it's a geographical reason. That sometimes people will say, well, you're a colonial oppressor, and you have colonized something that doesn't belong to you. Well, that ignores Israel's historic claim to that land that goes back at least 3,000 years to David and beyond to Abraham. It's not a colonial state. They were the inhabitants that God promised the land to. I find it rather striking that people miss that fact. But then there's a hypocrisy in people who make that charge, because often they'll point the finger at Israel and they'll forget that Islam is actually a much greater colonialist power. Where Islam went, it conquered, and then it says it can never be anybody else's. Wow. Look at history. be careful when you make that claim. Then fourthly, I said there's a civilizational reason why we should support Israel and the Jewish people, and quite simply because they have brought so much blessing to the world. You might recall Genesis 12:3, I believe it is, where God says, "In you all the families of the earth will be blessed." And one of our friends here was talking about all the technological gifts that the Jewish people have given and all the Nobel Prizes. But I said, go back even further. You know, it was the Jewish people that brought monotheism to the world. I mean, through God's revelation, which brought sanity to the world, saying there's a unified existence. We can know things. They brought the idea of human dignity to the world. They brought the idea of there are two kinds of freedom: freedom under God, freedom apart from God. One is the way of life, one is the way of death. They brought the idea of covenant to the world, the basis of social order. There are just so many gifts like that that they gave, and I enumerated many of them. And then I talked about a Christian reason why we should support Israel, and that is our Bible is from the Jews. You know, the Old Testament. Most of our Bible is the Hebrew Scriptures. And in the Hebrew Scriptures, we learn all the key concepts to understand the New Testament. We learn about creation, fall, redemption, the making of a new heaven and earth. I mean, there's so much that's there. We would have no Joseph, no Mary, no Jesus if it wasn't for the Jews. And so Christians forget the Jewish foundations of their faith. And so for all these reasons, I think Christians should be sympathetic to Israel and, of course, supportive to their Jewish friends, especially at this time. I believe we're at what I call an Esther-Mordecai moment. You know, it was Esther and Mordecai who lived when Persia was going to destroy the Jews. This has happened many times through history. They were going to wipe them out. And it was Mordecai who would not bow to Haman. He would not bow, and to the relativism that Haman represented. And it was Esther who courageously spoke up. And I said, we are at a Mordecai-Esther moment, both of them, you know, and we need to stand and speak at this time, because who knows that we were born for such a time as this. One of the biggest things that God has done in my life to give me a burden for Israel and the Jewish people is reading the Bible. You know, I try every year to read through the whole Bible. And if you haven't read the Bible thoroughly, please do, both Testaments. But I would direct you especially to the book of Esther, because it's not just a book, it's a pattern that you see all through history. I would recommend you to Psalm 83 to read about what's really behind anti-Semitism. I would recommend that you read Romans chapter 11. So reading the Bible. The second thing was traveling to the Holy Land. I've had the privilege of leading about 5 tours and teaching on location at different sites. And you just realize what a special place. It's so tiny, but it's a very special place where very important things happened. But in the last 2 years, I actually took a trip to Israel, 2 trips. I was invited by some Jewish friends. And in that trip, we did some amazing things. We went up to the border of Lebanon and into some of the villages right on the Lebanese border. And we were given a tour of some of the tunnels that Hezbollah has dug into Israel to plan for its invasions. And it's really sobering when you see how close that all is and how threatening that is. And you look over the wall and you see signs saying 1,000 jihadis are coming to Jerusalem. I mean, there's an intention on the other side, and it's not a nice neighbor or neighborhood. And then this past summer, I was down near Gaza and went to the Nova site, and I was talking to survivors of the October 7th attack and listening to them and hearing about what happened. And that all deepened my love for Israel and the Jewish people as well, and my desire to stand with them at this time. My final word is especially aimed at young people. You are the future. We love you, but think, read, become biblically literate, and do not fall for the poisonous anti-Semitism that is being promoted. And you need to think Christianly about this, and instead of taking this in, be a blessing to your Jewish friends. Be one of the greatest blessings in their life. And you'll probably have an opportunity to tell them of the reason for the hope within you.